Hi my loves and welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today's video is a dupe or don't, and today we are duping the Subculture palette versus the W7 on the Rocks palette. I was really excited to see that W7 were duping Subculture. Now sometimes I get a bit like kind of it's a total rip-off, and I don't think these brands should be doing this because like the original look, I know like Anastasia would have spent months and if not years trying to develop this palette, whereas you know, for another brand just to come along and kind of like steal the idea. This palette isn't even inspired. I did pick up the mint chocolate chip palette from Makeup Revolution, which is supposed to be kind of like the Subculture, but it has loads of different shades in it, so it is more of an inspired look, whereas this is straight up the exact same shades. So I'm going to do this video like I do every single dupe or don't. I'm going to compare both of the palettes, talk about the pros and cons of them, talk about the way that they perform on the eyes, do a little demo on the eyes so you can see how both of them work, and then we're going to do the comparative swatches. So first of all, we're going to talk about Subculture. Subculture was one of the most controversial eyeshadow palettes of 2017. I think every single person in the beauty community oh, what am I going to say there? Everybody in the beauty community had their 2 cents about this palette. Everybody wanted to say something about it, whether it be negative or positive. Everybody was totally all over this palette when it came out because it was so different. We had all loved the Modern Renaissance palette from Anastasia and we're all super excited for this. I know I was, because I love greens. I just love this whole retro feel that you get from this palette. I love like how 70s inspired it is with the pops of yellow, the greens, the purples. I just really was looking forward to getting this palette, and I bought this the second it went on sale. If you want to see my first impressions of this palette, I will leave it down below. But how do I feel about the palette now after using it for what, three months it would be, maybe 4-5 months? God, how long have I had you? I don't even know. I've dipped in and out of this palette a lot, and I will say the pros of this palette for me are the shades. Definitely, I absolutely love the shades, and I still feel the same about the shades. I still love them, especially the greens. They're like my favorite part of the palette. But the major cons I have of this is the palette is super pigmented. Like you can see that, like that is just incredible. Like you might think, oh, but that's not necessarily like a downside, but it is when you're trying to apply eyeshadows to the eye and they just kind of grab to certain areas and you find them a bit tricky to blend out. You either look like someone who's got punched in the eye or you're trying to resemble a panda bear. It's just not cute. I have to use a slight hand with this, like really tiny, like barely even touching the shadows in order to get them to perform. It's really temperamental. Some days this palette works amazingly on my eyes, some days it looks like shite and I just can't do anything with my eye look. So that is the downside to this palette. The pigmentation of some of the shades, like Adorn in particular, is absolutely gorgeous. The like shades like Rowdy, so pigmented, like everything that you want. And I particularly love the shade Electric. It is so high maintenance for me. I find it hard to get to work sometimes, but look at the pigmentation. Like you just cannot go wrong, bar the exception of Electric. It just doesn't work for me some days at all, and I can't use Fix Plus with it because it just goes really chunky. The majority of the people that used this palette and reviewed it said they didn't like it. I was probably like one of the only people out there who actually did genuinely like it, and I do like it. I just don't like how much work you have to put in with it. So you just have to really be prepared to put the time and effort into actually applying this and blending it and being careful with how much you apply. And for a beginner, this is a ridiculous palette to pick up. I would not recommend this to any beginner. That's kind of how I feel about the palette. My full review will be linked down below if you want to see more information. I was interested when On The Rocks came out from W7. The shades in these are gorgeous because they're exactly the same as Subculture. And when I was using it this morning, I have swatched all the shades. They're all swatched there. I was really surprised because I've had the worst luck with W7 palettes. I swear that majority of them are junk, and that's not me being really harsh, that's just me being honest. I have used W7 in the past and you can see those videos where there's no performance on the eye whatsoever. They're really chalky, they don't blend out well, there's no pigmentation in them, and I just found when I was using this today I was pleasantly surprised with the pigmentation. Now I will say, when you are swatching them, and you will see that in the video comparison to the actual application, they do swatch a bit more pigmented than what you get on the eye, so you really have to build them up. I do feel like I have to go in maybe 3-4 times to get like something like Magnum to show up on my eye, and that's what I used out here today. But I do feel like once you persevere with it, you can get the build up. So it's not that this is a really low maintenance alternative, it's just that the shadows work a little bit better. You still have to build them up. Like I will show you Magnum swatch, like it is a little bit less pigmented. I'm just putting it there so you can see like how it is a little bit less pigmented than the Subculture ones, but I'm not disappointed in that, because I do feel like it's easier to apply them to your eyes. They perform a bit better on my eye. The major pro with this palette for me is the price. This palette only costs €12. Now the shipping from W7's website I think was around €5. This palette took approximately 4 to 5 days to get to me. It's only coming from the UK, so do bear that in mind. €17 to get this here versus the €50 Subculture palette cost. It's totally worth it in my opinion, and I don't want to spoil too much for you guys because I will tell you in the end if it is a dupe. To me, this palette is everything that I wanted from Subculture, but just at a lower price tag. And also I don't have to work as hard on the shadows. I know like some of them are not as crazy pigmented, but that actually works well for me. I did do a dupe or don't on the Renaissance palette versus another W7 palette that was supposed to be identical, and I thought that it was absolutely rubbish. Not to spoil that video for you, but if you want to see how the shadows performed in that video, I'll link it down below. But this one was much better. Definitely a different formula to the other W7 equivalent to the Renaissance palette. It was a lot creamier, much easier to use. The shadows didn't blend into one, and I found that they actually performed and looked nicer on the eyes. So that is basically all I want to say about those palettes. Subculture, so unpredictable. Like if I brought this traveling with me and it was the only eyeshadow palette I had for like 4 days, some days it might look great, some days it might not even work. Whereas I feel like this is going to work every single time. I think W7 did a really good job formulating this palette. I think the packaging is great. I think everything about this palette is very good. I'm not crazy about imitations. I've mentioned that before. They were a little bit passive aggressive with their marketing on this as well. Like they did say, oh, we got it right or something like that in regards to like Anastasia not getting it right with this. The other thing to note as well, I don't know if you care, but this has an 18-month shelf life and this only has 6 months. So this is probably out of date now because I have it nearly 5-6 months. So guys, if you want to see how I achieved this eye look and compared both palettes on my eyes, then let's head on into the tutorial. I'm going to start off by priming my eyelids with my Paint Early Paint Pot, and I'm going to put that on both of my eyelids so that it is equal. Okay, so going in with the Subculture palette first, I'm going to take Dawn and place that through my crease. I'm just taking a really light hand with this like I always do. This palette is super pigmented, like it's crazy pigmentation. And now with the W7 on the Rocks palette, I'm gonna take this shade here, Mosquito, oh my god, I can't pronounce that. I've noticed that there's not as much kick up with these shadows as the Subculture. There's a little bit, but not a whole lot. So far the shadow is good. The pigmentation of it is actually pretty nice, pretty decent, and it blends out pretty well. So next up on Subculture, I'm going to go in with New Wave, and again I'm going to pop that through the crease as well. This is like my favorite shade from the palette. I love this and I love to warm up the crease with this. My only complaint with the shade ever is wherever you kind of put it down first, you can kind of see the way it leaves kind of like drag marks almost, or it's more pigmented where you first put it down. But if you just kind of work on it and blend it, I know that's people's major complaint with this palette. Okay, taking Bellini now on the same brush that I used that first shade with. I feel like this shade is a tad bit more yellow than this one. This one kind of has a bit of orange in it, but I feel like this shade should never have been orange. It should be the yellow that I'm getting from this side. I am going to add in a little bit of edge just to this look, just to kind of bring it back to the yellow. And then again, just to even it out, I'm going to take Pina Colada. Where is it? Down here. Next on the blending brush, I'm going to take Untamed for the Subculture palette. I'm just going to place that on the outer corner of my eye. I prefer to apply this with a brush like this than with a flat shader brush, because sometimes I feel like it just packs too much colour on and it's hard to blend it out. Whereas if you start with this, you get a good dispersion of colour. And if you feel like you lost any of the yellow, you can go back in with the yellow over the top as well. Sometimes I don't really like how the colors mix. Do you see that? It can kind of look a bit sloppy and messy. You just have to really be careful with this palette. I take Magnum, the shade here. This is definitely not as pigmented. I have to go in a few times. I'm really needing to dig my brush in, and I don't know if you can see that, but there is a little bit of color kick up from that shade there. The colors are blending a little bit better, I think, are they? So next up is Adorn. I'm just going to pop that in the center part of my eye. It's just this gorgeous gold shade here. I didn't use any Fix Plus with Adorn, so I'm going to not use any Fix Plus with Espresso Martini, which is this shade here from W7. Ooh, actually surprisingly pigmented. Finally, for the Subculture side, I'm going to go in with Electric. You literally have to dig the pan out to get any color payoff on a brush. I rarely use Fix Plus with this because I feel like it changes the consistency of it, makes it kind of lumpy. I'm going to take Champagne Toast from W7. It's not great. It's okay though. It does look a little bit different to Electric. It's not a complete dupe. It's probably the only shade in this palette I've used so far that's not like identical, but it's close enough that you would get away with it. Subculture here, and then On the Rocks palette here. So I'm just going to turn them that way because that's just going to be the best way for you guys to be able to see the shadows. So I'm going to swatch these like I would normally swatch them. We're going to go with Cube first, and the equivalent from the On the Rocks palette is Sugar Rim. So, but look, oh my god, look at Sugar Rim. That's that one there on top compared to Cube on the bottom. So that is Sugar Rim, and that's Cube beside it. So that one's very surprising. So next I'm going to take Dawn, and I'm going to go in with this shade here. This is the Subculture and Mosquito. So you can see that they're a little bit different. Destiny and Martini Olive. That's them there, Martini Olive on the top, obviously. So that's Destiny and Martini Olive. I should have swatched them the same way as I did the first one. Sorry about that, guys. But you can see what I mean about the greens. I already mentioned that earlier. They're just not as pigmented, but definitely buildable. We've got Adorn and Espresso Martini. Them, they're very similar, and I used that in the tutorial. So that's Adorn. So that's those swatches there. That's the only one that I mixed up. So that's the one from W7. That's the one from the Subculture palette. So next I'm going to go in with All Star and Maraschino Cherry. They look like, that's very, very good actually. So Subculture and then W7. Wow, the W7 one's nearly better. Next Mercury, and then we've got Cheers. So Mercury and Cheers. Cheers is a little bit patchy, a little bit powdery, and definitely different shades. Next I'm going in with Axis, and then taking the equivalent. Hate trying to get my fingers into them. So that's what they look like. Very different. So that's Axis, and that's the W7. So you can see that they are quite similar, but just the W7 one needs to be built up a little bit more. Then we're going to go in with Roxy, another shadow I do have issues with from time to time. And I'm taking Body Shot from the W7. So that's what they look like. Body Shot is a much paler orange. You can see the W7 one is just a little bit less pigmented. So there you go, there's all the swatches. Subculture is on the right, W7 on the left. Next I'm taking my personal favorite, Electric. This really needs a bit of work. Doesn't swatch as amazing. And I'm taking Champagne Toast, which is much better formulated in my opinion. They are a different formula straight up. This is definitely more of like a shimmer. Going in with Fudge and then Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary is a lot lighter than Fudge. Fudge is another one that I have issues with when I'm swatching or putting them on my eye. New Wave and then Bellini. And I use these in the tutorial and I thought they were very similar. They are super, super, super similar. Bellini actually works better because it doesn't go as patchy as New Wave. And then I'm going to take Untamed and then Magnum. So that's Magnum on the top and that's Untamed. Untamed, Magnum. So Magnum needs to be built up, and I use this in the tutorial. It takes an awful lot of work to get it to show as pigmented as this, but it is easier to work with on the eye. And then the final two shades are Edge and then Pina Colada. Pina Colada worked out quite well actually in the tutorial. So Edge, Pina Colada. Pina Colada is actually
quite pigmented. And then last but not least, we've got Rowdy, and then Last Call. Rowdy and Last Call. I use this in another eye look and it actually works better than Rowdy because I just feel like Rowdy just gets very, very, very patchy on me. So I'm just going to apply the last shades underneath my eyes, and I'm going to take Untamed from Subculture, and I'm just going to apply that to the... And with On the Rocks palette, I'm going to take the shade Magnum. I'm just going to place that in the exact same place. And then I'm going to take Adorn from Subculture and then just place that inner portion of my eye, just bringing it right into that electric shade. And I'm going to use Espresso Martini and I place that on the same, in the same place rather, on the W7 eye. And we are done and done. I am super happy with the eye look. I did the same eye look that I did the first time I ever tried out the Subculture palette. I think out of all the W7 palettes I've ever used, I think this is the best one that I've ever used, hands down. And I think this is the first time in a dupe or don't where I actually prefer this palette to the OG or the original. Green shade and the grey Cheers are the only ones that I kind of had issues with being like different, as in you have to build them up, and definitely on the eye I think that they took a little bit more effort to build up. But are they dupes? That's the big question, guys. I actually think that the W7 palette is better than a dupe. Besides the greens, which take a little bit more work, I feel like this palette is even better than the original Subculture. I am actually floored that I'm saying that. The quality of the shadows in this palette are insane. I thought this morning I was going to try this palette on and I was going to hate it and just be like, no guys, stick with Subculture. But Subculture is a 40, no, I think it's actually a 50 euro palette here in Ireland. I feel like if it performed exactly the same as the Renaissance palette, it would be worth the money. But for me, I would splurge on the whole 12 euro to get this palette because it is much better quality in my opinion. It works better on my eyes. I really enjoy the eye look I got. I got exactly the same eye look as I did from this one. Finally used these shades because I've loved this palette for so long but only can do a certain amount of looks with it. I can finally use this palette, use the shades that I love, and achieve a really, really, really pretty look. If you are interested in the W7 On the Rocks, I believe the only place you can get it from is their website. That's where I bought it. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and there you go. That's all you need to know. I'll talk to you guys in my next one. Mwah. Bye.